You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Locked On Mets, free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. On today's show, we got another Mets loss to discuss, and really some big questions about Christian Scott. Another rough outing for him. Is this just growing pains, or is Christian Scott not ready to be part of the big league rotation? I'll talk about that and also look at the road ahead throughout the rest of this week. Before we get to any of it, though, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at JustBaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use the code, all in lowercase, LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. All right, so when I left on my trip last night, heading over to Disneyland, I was, head on the pillow just thinking about, all right, what am I going to talk about in the show? I know that it's going to be another game, Mets versus Marlins, very weird series that stretches out till Monday, so there's no finality there. There's no series to preview. And there was sort of two thoughts in my head. I was like, it's either going to be, all right, Christian Scott is ready, and this was a big start, his first big league win, and we could talk about that, or there would be more questions. And unfortunately, there's more questions, and it comes down to the same thing that has plagued Christian Scott throughout his big league career up to this point. That's the home run ball. Because Christian Scott, through this game against the Marlins, did not pitch horribly, although the line at the end doesn't look great, where he only goes 4 innings, gives up 7 hits, 3 runs, walks 2, strikes out 4. But it comes down to one swing of the bat again that kills him. Christian Scott has had a problem with the home run ball all season long, dating back to when he was carving up hitters in AAA, where he had pretty much no problems. But even in those games where he gave up 1 run or 2 runs, it was always a solo home run or a bloop and a blast that got him. And now we're seeing the same thing at the big league level. You look at what he's done overall, and, so far he's pitching to a 4.56 ERA through 9 starts. That's not terrible. His whip is 1.2. That's not that bad. You look at the innings pitched, did much better in his first stint, funny enough, where he went 6 in 3 of his first 5 starts. Since he's come back into the rotation, he has yet to get through that 6th inning. In the last 2, he hasn't even made it out of the 5th. And today, he didn't even pitch in the 5th inning. So to break down exactly what happened in this outing, you saw him show his stuff in certain moments of this game where it's, all right, that's the Christian Scott that we were all so excited to see. First inning, gives up a leadoff single to Jazz Chisolm, gets a couple flyouts, and then a big inning-ending strikeout against Jake Burger that really showed his stuff. Made you feel pretty good about what he was going to do throughout the rest of the day. Second inning, gives up a couple of hits, but works around it, gets the final out of that inning to strand those 2 runners. That was in the bottom of the second. Third inning, worked out of a really big jam. So he gets Jazz Chisolm to fly out to lead things off. Then he gives up a base hit to Brian De La Cruz, walks 2 batters to load the bases. But he gets a huge strikeout to get the second out of the inning. Then he gets Otto Lopez to pop up to get out of the third. Fourth inning is where it all fell apart for Christian. He's sitting in a situation where he gives up 2 hits to start off the inning, gets it out on a sacrifice bunt. So first base is open, Jazz Chisolm is up. And you look at the Marlins lineup right now. You go 1 through 9 by OPS. And this just makes it frustrating. The Mets have even lost 2 games in this series. But you have Jazz Chisolm, 733. Brian De La Cruz, 684. Josh Bell, 636. Jake Burger, 669. Jesus Sanchez, 714. Otto Lopez, 630. Xavier Edwards, 831. And then Vidal Brujan, 633. Nick Fortes, 471. There's certain batters in this lineup that you just can't let beat you. And Jazz Chisolm is the one you got to circle. Because even though Chisholm's not having the best of years, he's still a guy that can hurt you with one swing of the bat. And the funny thing was, they were talking about after the game, Well, Christian said he pretty much located the home run pitch exactly where he wanted to. He starts off Jazz Chisolm and nowhere near the strike zone, so he falls behind 2-0. Gets him to chase a couple of times out of the zone to even up the count. Throws a fastball nowhere near the zone. Jazz looks at it, so it's an even count. He was looking to locate a slider low and in on Jazz Chisolm in a full count. But Jazz is too good of a hitter, and he's able to drop the barrel down, get all over it, cover it, and he hits a home run. And that's the ball game for Christian Scott, really. You give up a 3-run home run there, and that's ultimately why you lose. And you now look at the record, and not the records mean anything, but it's 0-3, and the Mets have been losing pretty much every time he takes the ball. And it's not all on him. The Mets lineup was not good today. I mean, they did get 8 hits, which is okay, but you only scored 2 runs and walked twice, struck out 14 times. 14 strikeouts. And a lot of those against the bullpen. I mean, Trevor Rogers went 4 2/3, struck out 5. But you go beyond that. Cronin, 3 strikeouts for the 4 outs that he got. A.J. Puck, 2 strikeouts the inning he pitched. Foucher, 2 strikeouts the inning he pitched. And then Tanner Scott. I said this the other day after the Friday night loss. If you end up in a position where the Marlins have Tanner Scott on the mound and he has a lead, you're going to lose. You're going to lose. And that's what happened in this game. So, yeah, ultimately, you got to blame the offense. It's not all on Christian Scott tonight or today. That's not why the Mets lost the game entirely. But seeing this rookie take the ball and continue to give up, a lot of times, a 3-run homer, those are backbreaking. And they really, really hurt you. You look at his 4 starts since coming back, and it was 5 2/3. He allowed 4 earned runs. That was against the Nationals on 6 hits. 1 big home run killed him in that game. Can't remember who hit it. It was Luis Garcia hit that home run. The Pirates, 5 2/3, gives up 2 runs, home run. Let's see who hit that one. That one's not jumping out the top of my head. Was it O'Neal Cruz that hit the home run against him? Let me look real quick. Yeah, O'Neal Cruz hit the 2-run homer against Christian Scott. Then the last time out against the Rockies, he gives up 2 home runs in that game across 4 1/3. And those runs ended up haunting him. And then this one swing of the bat from Jazz Chisolm, and that is the difference. And instead of being able to go out there for the 5th inning, Carlos Mendoza, in a tight game with his team pressing, says, I'm going to go to Adrian Hauser. And Hauser did a fine job ultimately. I mean, he ends up giving up a home run himself. So a solo shot for Hauser that he allowed. He went 2 2/3, gave up 2 hits, one of them being that solo blast. Walked 1, struck out 2. Ultimately, you put yourself in a position, though, where you're trying to battle back the whole game. And again, part of that's on the offense. And there were some opportunities that were missed, absolutely. It just feels like playing in Miami this time of the year is always a house of horrors. I don't know why. It does not make sense. This team was 30 games under 500 entering this series, and the Mets are going to be lucky to come out of this with a split. So the problems from this series go far beyond Christian Scott. But are we going to talk about this offense being an issue right now, considering what they've done over the last 40 games prior to the All-Star break? I mean, this could just be shaking off some rust after getting some time off. And for all we know, the Mets might win the final game in Miami, and they might go into the Bronx and put up a ton of runs against the Yankees and sweep them again. And that it's a completely different narrative. So the reason why today's show is really going to be focusing in on Christian Scott is because that is now becoming an issue. That's becoming something that we got to talk about because he's not getting the job done. And no one has been a bigger proponent of Christian Scott than me dating back to last year. Okay, this was a prospect that I was really excited to see this season. I still am excited to see him hold on to a spot in this rotation. But I do wonder how the way this season has gone has maybe, with the minor league stint in the middle of starting to get his feet wet, if that has maybe hurt him a little bit. And moving forward, are these issues that he can iron out? Can he figure this thing out moving forward? Or is this just going to be a constant battle where you can't necessarily expect too much out of Christian Scott down the stretch? And if that's the case, what's the alternative? So that's what I want to talk about next. Before we get into it, though, first, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. You watch the winnings roll in. Get on the daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks, so you could turn $10 into $1,000. If you're looking for promotions, Prize Picks has got you covered every week, from lowering select player stat projections on Tuesdays to help your lineup hit, or getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with Prize Picks. Today's episode is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, or it brings home the winning trophy. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports by checking out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. All right, so what's the solution with Christian Scott? What can be fixed? What can be done to help him? Here's the thing. I look at the way his season has gone, and if you just want to talk about his development, we're going to remove the Mets and the playoff implications and pushing for this season, all that. We're going to set that aside. Christian Scott needs to be in the big leagues. He goes to the minor leagues, and he's not challenged. He's not. And this is a guy that does have a home run issue, but that does not mean it's something that will plague him for the rest of his career. Some of those home runs are still just refining his breaking pitches in particular, where he just leaves a slider out over the heart of the plate too much. Now, the home run he gave out today was a good pitch, but it was also, as Carlos Mendoza talked about after the game, feeling out the moment. You have first base empty. You have Brian De La Cruz next. You are far better pitching to right-handed batters than lefties. Brian De La Cruz, let me look and see what he did on the day. Brian De La Cruz against Christian Scott. Well, not against Christian Scott. He was 1 for 4 overall. And if I go through at bat by at bat, I mean, he flew out after Jazz Chisolm. Earlier in the game, first inning, he flew out. And then he got an at bat in the third inning, I believe. He singled. But the single, I think, was very softly hit. 70 miles per hour off the bat. Look, with Brian De La Cruz, yes, you don't want to walk him with the bases loaded, obviously, and there's always that risk. But for Christian Scott, you don't have to worry about that. He's a controlled pitcher. So, yes, that was a moment where you got to throw a slider in the dirt. And if Jazz Chisolm beats himself and swings at it, perfect. You get out of the inning. Or you get the big out, I should say, because they still had to get one more after that. But you get around that really tough batter, and you end up winning that battle. But if he spits on it, and he takes his walk, and it's bases loaded, well, guess what? You can get Brian De La Cruz, who got his single on a ground ball. You can get a double play ball. You can get him to strike out, get Josh Bell out. I mean, you have to think about those spots in the lineup, and that is part of being a big leaguer. It's getting those game reps, seeing the difference. Because in the minor leagues, there might be a couple guys you fear, and you're probably still attacking them. But when you're attacking, Kyle Manzardo, for example, Guardians prospect, gave Christian Scott fits this year. When he's attacking Kyle Manzardo, there's typically nobody on, and a solo home run does not kill you. A lot of times we saw that throughout his minor league stint this year, solo home runs. Now in the big leagues, some of those solo home runs are 3-run shots, and those are backbreakers. But I don't think that Christian Scott is at a point in his development where he needs to go back down to AAA and figure things out. What he needs to learn is at the big league level. And I think part of the frustrating aspect of that is you look at what he was doing his first run through, the first 5 starts. 3.90 ERA. He did give up 3 home runs. But he didn't give up a home run every single start. And he was starting to get into a little bit of a rhythm. And then you pull the ripcord on him, and rightfully so. From that point where they sent him down, that was May 30th. Okay, so that was the beginning of this great run of success for the Mets. Part of it was sending him down, holding back his innings a little bit, but really it was about going to a 5-man rotation, and Christian Scott wasn't capable of doing that at this stage of his career. Now you have a 6-man rotation that's about to come into play. And so I think they made the right call with when they put him back into the rotation, and maybe you're seeing a little more growing pains. It's almost like he had to sort of start it over, start learning these lessons again. But he's still 9 starts into his big league career. You can't give up on this kid this soon because there's still some really promising stuff that he has shown, and the ability to face big league lineups, not walk a lot of guys, that's one big challenge for a young pitcher. So he's got that one checked off. Showing the ability to get a big strikeout in some of these tough spots. He's done that. He has pitched himself out of jams. Now what you need to see is him keep the ball in the yard, and we're still waiting for the dominant start. You look at the hits that he's allowed, and a lot of them have been sort of cheap hits, but they're still hits nonetheless. You look across his starts, he's given up 5 hits in 5 of his 9 starts. That's something that's got to come down a little bit. So if there's less traffic on the bases, the occasional home run won't kill him as much. But really, if you're thinking about the prospect of sending him down, what is the alternative to Christian Scott? You could say roll out a 5-man rotation with Kodai Senga, but it doesn't seem like they want to do that. Now, I know the other case would be let Jose Butto start for the Mets. But to me, and I've said this before, in a 6-man rotation, Jose Butto pitches once a week. As the 7th or 8th inning guy at times for the Mets, Jose Butto in a week might be able to give you 3 appearances. As a Swiss Army knife long man in leverage, if he gives you 2 innings, you might be able to get that twice a week. And the outs that he gets are critical junctures of the game where the Mets desperately need him. Yeah, sure, if they get 3 great relievers at the deadline, maybe you make that move. Butto in the rotation, Christian Scott, AAA, and you develop him next year. But I think Christian Scott's a huge part of the Mets' plans in 2025. So if I had to guess, David Stearns wants to win this year, but he also wants to develop the guys that are going to help him next season, where the Mets can really make a run. Christian Scott, Mark Vientos, Francisco Alvarez, even Brett Beatty, they've fallen into that conversation. I think that's part of why Brett Beatty is still sitting in Syracuse, because they would rather him play every day than play in a limited role. I think Brett Beatty would be better in the DJ Stewart role right now. But do you want Brett Beatty getting 10 plate appearances a week? So that is the give and take that the Mets have to deal with right now. But if you look at the 6-man rotation, the only alternative right now, because I don't think you can remove Jose Butto from the bullpen, would be to go back to Tyler McGill or Joey Lucchesi. And Joey Lucchesi is not even on the 40 anymore, and I don't think that Tyler McGill is going to pitch much better than Christian Scott has. So you got to give him some time, and hopefully as he continues to go through this process, he's going to get better. And I think what he's really missing at this point is just that one great start. That one great start where he goes up against a team and he just carves. And that can happen. Let me see if I can figure out when his next start is. I mean, trying to do it based on the lineups he's facing, it might be a little bit foolish because how do you fare against the Marlins? His next start would be against the Braves. But how about that, right? So let's just say against the Atlanta Braves, he gives the Mets 6 strong innings. He strikes out 7. He allows 1 run. Well, maybe now he carries that confidence with him moving forward, and you might get a better version of Christian Scott. I still believe that Christian Scott deserves to be in this 6-man rotation right now. I think it's the best thing for the Mets long term for his development. And I honestly don't think there's an alternative in AAA that is better than Christian right now. So that would be what I think should happen. That's what I think will happen. I think the Mets really do care about developing him at the big league level. And so we'll continue to see that. But the Mets got to put up runs when he's on the mound, because there's always that chance that another 3-run home run is going to get allowed, and you got to give him a little bit of a cushion. So we'll see what the next Christian Scott start looks like. But now you look at the road ahead for the Mets this week, things get tough, okay? And you just put yourself in a position where the lightest part of your schedule before the deadline, you have now completely screwed up, and there's a chance you lose a 4-game set against the Marlins. I want to talk about that in just a minute. First, though, another word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we've gotten fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want, because all I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime some news breaks on the Mets. You can also ask me questions anytime. You get these starting lineup graphics sent to your phone every day. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Look at the wild card race right now. You're going to see the Atlanta Braves still atop the heap at 54-44 as I'm recording this at, I guess maybe most of these games are done. 9:18 on the East Coast. It's weird being on West Coast time, people. It's 6 o'clock here. I don't know what I'm doing. Jet lag, whole deal. Feeling strange. But getting back to baseball. The Braves got a 4-game lead. The Cardinals have a game and a half lead over the Mets. And then you have the Mets, the Diamondbacks, the Padres all tied. The Pirates half a game back. Meanwhile, you still have the Giants, the Cubs, the Reds, technically the Nationals, all hanging around. We have talked so much about this team and what they're going to do at the deadline, and the position for David Stearns just gets murkier and murkier. If you have a bad week to close here, if you end up dropping a game or two against the Yankees and you lose a 4-game set to the Braves after maybe even losing one to the Marlins, where are you going to be sitting in this wild card race? You're not going to be in a playoff position. Are you going to be sitting in Giants-Cubs territory? Are you going to be in a heap of teams that are pretty much tied or within a game of each other? Are you going to be even further out of it? I mean, it really just depends on how the Mets can fare the rest of the week and what everybody else does. But you can't have a bad week going into the deadline because it makes you more cautious about buying. And I can see a world where the Mets just have to do the unpopular thing and do nothing, where David Stearns gets in front of a microphone after the deadline and says, we explored the market and we didn't like any of the value opportunities that there were, but we're going to bring up Shintaro Fujinami to help the bullpen, and Sean Reed-Foley and Reed Garrett are going to come back into the fold here. That's going to help us out, and we think the bullpen was the only real area of need for us, so we think we can patch it together internally, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to win this season. We still believe in these guys, and we think that they have enough. That's why we decided to just stand pat, not sell, but also not buy. And that might be the best thing for the franchise, honestly. Just let this season play out and try to develop the guys that are going to be around beyond this year and just try to have a fun season out of it all. But the guys in the clubhouse want the Mets to buy. They want to see some type of additions. But as I've talked about on this show, I mean, what additions are going to be made here? That's where I've gone back time and again to the Tigers trade that I've continued to talk about. And for those of you who maybe didn't catch any of those episodes, it's the idea of getting Jason Foley, who gives you a long-term relief option. He's their closer now in Detroit, but probably better served as an eighth-inning guy. And you have him with 3 years of control beyond this season. That is worth giving up some prospect capital for. You might get Andrew Chafin in that deal to give you a left-handed reliever. So now you've bolstered the bullpen with 2 positive veteran arms. And then you get Mark Canha for the vibes, because I think Mark Canha would be much better than DJ Stewart is. And at least that would be a trade where the Mets wouldn't have to give up that much. But I think the clubhouse would feel like they got a lot back, is the way I would look at that. So maybe that is the move. Maybe it's something along those lines where you're buying, but you're shopping in, you're shopping in the clearance aisle a little bit, and you're trying to find the best pieces. It's, if the Mets were to have come out of the break and swept the Marlins in a 4-game set and split with the Yankees and won a series against the Braves, I think as you're approaching that deadline next Monday, it's next Tuesday, I believe. Let me check and make sure I'm right on that one. But, next Tuesday. But a lot of trades and decisions are going to be made on that Monday. If you came out of that series against the Braves and you're feeling great about the Mets as David Stearns, all of a sudden you're maybe a little more aggressive. And I don't know if that's the right thing or the wrong thing. So It's just one of those where we are sitting here watching it unfold, and it's frustrating every time they lose. Always is, but particularly right now against this Marlins team, these are tough losses to swallow. And I just hope that with David Peterson on the mound, the Mets can get a great performance, and they can finally wake up as an offense and carry that into the series against the Yankees, because now they got to do their work in the more tough settings here. You gotta do it against the Yankees away, and then you come home but have to face a Braves team that is always going to play you really tough. I think the Mets still have everything at their fingertips as far as what they need to get the job done, and I still believe in this team. I believe they can make a run, but more losses that you have to the teams like the Marlins out there, the harder it is to completely and fully buy in. And if that internal struggle is going on with me as a podcast host who's just looking to create content about the team and get people excited to watch the Mets and to be engaged on the show each day, imagine if you're making all the decisions and you're thinking about next year and beyond, and you're calling teams and they're asking for prospects that you think can be valuable assets to the organization moving forward. This is a tough team to buy for. It really is. It's a very tough team to sell anything on at this point, but it's just as hard to buy. So this is a very, very interesting stretch that lies ahead the rest of this week. This is not how the Mets wanted to get things started, but you turn the page, it's a Monday, and you do everything you can to put together a strong week. The Mets can win 4 out of the 7 games they play this week. I honestly think they'd be in a great spot. I really do. And that's crazy to say, but if they're pretty much where they're at right now, so they win the final game against the Marlins, they split the next 2 series, I think the body of work before the break will be enough that the Mets will at least make sure that bullpen's not an issue, and then just hope that their lineup can fire and get things going again, that their rotation, with Kodai Senga being entered into the fold, is going to be good enough to at least survive the marathon. But we will have plenty of time over the coming days and the final week ahead before the deadline to see how all this unfolds and ultimately find out the direction that the Mets are going to take. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. I appreciate all of you who tuned into the show. If you want to follow us wherever you get your podcast, please do so. Subscribe there, follow, rate, review. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. We're trying to get up to 10,000 subs by the end of this season, so I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. You can follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. We're talking about Locked On Sports today with our local experts from each team and our league-wide experts from each league. You find Locked On Sports today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.